Hello, everyone, and welcome to our special event today at the Center for Women's Leadership at the Forbes School of Business and Technology as we host Miss Bribiesca-Hedin as she teaches you to prepare your success plan for 2023. You're going to learn some new approaches to promote strategic thinking and ultimately your success. We are both delighted and honored to have with us today Bribiesca-Hedin. She is the founder and CEO of Bridgewell Professional Services, a leadership development and strategy execution firm in Southern California. Her expertise and passions are coaching her clients to become influential leaders and gain recognition for their contributions without overworking, people-pleasing, or selling their souls. Prior to starting her own firm, the strategy expert turned leadership coach spent 8 years with a comprehensive cancer center, helping them plan and implement their transformative initiatives. She holds not one, but 2 graduate degrees from the University of Southern California. She began her career as a management consultant with a global Big 4 consulting firm, gaining unparalleled experience in advising leaders on how to mobilize their teams to deliver on strategic priorities. In addition to undergraduate and graduate degrees, she holds advanced certificates in leadership, psychology, professional coaching, and real estate development. She lives in Southern California with her husband, 3 children, and 2 dogs. Asia, we are ecstatic to have you with us today. To our audience, we are thrilled to have you here as well. Throughout today's event, if you have comments or questions for Asia, please be sure to pop those into the chat. I'm going to be monitoring the chat, and we may stop periodically for some questions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to your presenter and our special guest today, Bribiesca-Hedin. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Brandy, and just thank you for having me here. I love being with the Forbes School of Business, and in particular, the Center for Women's Leadership. And it's funny, when we were initially talking about this session and what it might look like, really the first thing that came to mind that we started tossing around is, we're really good in general at kind of saying, hey, this is what I want. This is really important to me. This is something I want to go after. And, just as we were preparing for this session, I made the comment of, the best laid plans, right? So we're always doing the tech check before. It doesn't matter how many times we do this, because even the best laid plans get derailed. And that is really what I wanted to focus on, because I suspect that as we're rolling into 2023, your heart and your mind might be in a couple of different places, right? So you might be in the camp where you're looking back at 22 and either, excited about what you accomplished, potentially you might be satisfied, or in many cases, you might feel like you were derailed. And as a result of either the economy, and of course, every day there's a new layoff announcement, as a result of obviously the pandemic that we're still recovering from, and just so much happening in the world that we're impacted by, those plans that you might have set out for yourself might have kind of fallen to the wayside. And understandably, because there are things that are coming up, right, that are calling for our more immediate attention, calling for immediate action. And so, we go towards that, but sometimes it's hard to redirect ourselves back to what it is that we said mattered and what it is that we were trying to do. And this seems to happen in particular when we have experienced a setback. Like, definitely, I don't know if you're able to use the reactions in here, but if you are, I love reactions. I love interactions. So ask me questions, all those good things. So I definitely want you to interact with me. But if you've ever had the experience of being incredibly enthusiastic about something, incredibly enthused, incredibly passionate, and then run up against a wall, something didn't go according to plan, or all of a sudden things got derailed, again, the best laid plans, and you found it hard to reconnect with that enthusiasm. You found it hard because either the experience of failure, that setback, that disappointment, however you want to characterize it. And I just want you to know you're not alone. That's a very human experience. And that doesn't necessarily go away, but what does happen is that we get better at staying on our success path. And so we're going to talk about that today. And again, I want to make sure that I'm able to touch on as much as I can in the time we have that would be important to you. So I'm going to bring up slides, but while I'm doing that, I'm going to invite you to go ahead and, open up the chat, put your hands on the keyboard, and then let me know what is one thing you're hoping to get or committed to getting out of our time together today in these next, whatever it is, 54 minutes that we have together. What is one thing you're committed to getting out of our time together today? Go ahead and share that in the chat. I'm going to open up the chat. And while you are doing that, I'm going to bring up the screen. And this is one of my absolute favorite quotes. This is one of my absolute favorite quotes in the entire world, because I spend so much time with my clients talking about the quality of their thinking. And you can see behind me, I wrote it up at the top of the hour. Some of you might have seen it as I was writing it on the board. But the quality of your thinking matters, and we're going to get into that. But the way that it ties in here is that oftentimes we allow setbacks, we allow failures, we allow missteps to mean something that they simply do not. And I think it's incredibly important that to be an effective leader, have an effective career, have success in any sort of relating with other human beings, which most of us, can't escape, even if we want to. In order to have success in any of those areas, it's really important that we have a different relationship with failure. We have a different relationship with setbacks. We have a different relationship with, criticism or people not behaving or responding the way we want them to. But we don't typically, by default, we often go to a place where we think that if we failed, something went wrong, right? Because if we think back when we were in school, the objective was to get everything right. And if you failed, you got an F, right? You weren't supposed to fail. But in life, and absolutely in business, failure is actually the path to learning. It's the path to growth. It's the path to expansion. So I love this quote by Nelson Mandela. Do not judge me by my successes. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. How many times I fell down and got back up again? Because here's the thing, you here have probably all, right, we're all probably kind of forward-thinking professionals. You obviously have a growth mindset because you're sitting in this conversation right now and, are dedicating your lunch time or whatever the case might be to seeing what you can pick up to apply and help you potentially advance your priorities. And although you've probably used similar words to encourage colleagues, to encourage friends, to encourage team members or fellow leaders when they've had setbacks, what I find is that most of us repeat these words, but we don't actually live them. So I want to talk about how to actually be able to handle setbacks and why we get so derailed, so that you can keep that from being what, it takes you farther away from your 2023 goals. So again, my favorite quote, and now I have to introduce, this is my own quote. If you're only going to be effective when things go according to plan, what are you going to do the other 90% of the time? Now, that's both meant to be funny and eye-opening. I'm not always funny when I try to be funny, but I do hope that it's eye-opening, because things often don't go according to plan. And that can't be what defines how effectively you show up. That can't be what defines whether you hang on to your intentions and your objectives or kind of let them kind of float away. So we're going to talk about making sure that you're able to handle the other 90% of the time. Because I'm not concerned that there's anyone here who isn't incredibly effective and confident and capable and focused when everything is going according to plan. The challenge is when everything is going according to plan, it requires much less of you. It requires less of this. It requires less high quality thinking. It's when things go off the rails that we're called to bring our best. And so let me look back at what you guys shared in the chat. Let's see. Okay, better strategies for goal development. Awesome. Thanks, Brandy. Changing my perspective on things that derail me. Thanks, Jasmine. Gain insight around what success means to me. That's always a good question to ask yourself, by the way. Always a good question to ask yourself. And I recommend asking it every few months and probably every week about any endeavor that's a priority. So always a good question. Yeah, no, our perspective, by the way, Brandy, you're not alone. Yeah, our perspectives hold us back all of the time. Let's see, ways to focus more on my wins instead of focusing on my losses. Absolutely. Nancy, learn how to grow after a failure or setback and come back stronger. Right on. Okay, excellent. So I love everything that you guys are looking to get out of the session, and I'm committed to you're going to walk away with that and more. And the intention is to have time at the end for Q&A, but feel free to drop your questions in the chat as I go, and I will refer to them as we're discussing, because what I find is that if you get distracted by a source of confusion, it often might derail you from being able to follow the rest. So go ahead and pop it in there, and whenever there's an opportunity, I will break and answer any questions you've asked. Okay, so let's get started. Your 2023 success plan. Now, I know you got an introduction, about me, so you know a little bit about me, but some of you might have never been in a space with me before. And what I want to share is that, by far, the results that my clients get, the success they have, whether they're in my group programs or my one-on-one program, it is really simply boiling down to one thing, and that is that the quality of their thinking has improved. Now, most of the people I work with, they're not right out of school. They're mid-career, later career professionals. So they have plenty of experience. They already have the expertise. They have the background. They have the credentials. They have all the education that they need. And oftentimes, what people in particular in that space do is when things aren't going according to plan, they go hunt down another credential. They go try to figure out how to get published in one more journal. They try to add one more project, because oftentimes what we're looking for is this experience of having control, of success, of things looking the way we want them to look. Unfortunately, though, right, when it comes to success and that feeling of that inherent feeling of confidence and that you've accomplished something, chasing credentials is often a short-lived boost. And while that's not what I'm, getting into today, I want to share that because I know we are that accomplished group of professionals. We are those, experienced people with plenty of successes behind us. And often your default is going to be to go learn something new, add something else to the pipeline, and prove yourself in some other way, all with an intention. And again, this is just a human reaction, all with an intention of filling that either self-esteem void or self-doubt void with someone else's temporary approval. And here's how I want you to see that. I wasn't planning on going down this path, but this seems incredibly relevant. So I hope this is helpful, you guys. There are accomplishments you're going to pursue because they are worthy of you pursuing and accomplishing them. And then there are accomplishments you are going to pursue because you want to prove that you are worthy of having accomplished them. So give me a quick yes in the chat if that resonates and you understand that. Give me a quick yes in the chat if that resonates, because I want to make sure that you're able to make that distinction, because I'm all about accomplishment. I love accomplishment. I love, going after new and big things and seeing it happen. But here's the distinction, and we're going to talk about this as we get into, talking about the quality of your thinking and decision drivers. That massive distinction is that when the attempt at the accomplishment falls flat and I miss it, I completely screw it up and just publicly humiliated, or whatever the case might be, right? Or even if it just feels that way, whether or not it's true is irrelevant, but rather that it feels that way. We will have a tendency to want to have it mean something about us. And so, what I want to leave you with, and why I wanted to start the conversation making that distinction, is that what you want to watch out for is when you're missing the mark or not hitting the accomplishment means something about you and the quality of who you are as a human being, as a professional, as, in your area of expertise or your domain, right? Be very weary of making it mean something that it doesn't. I want you to watch yourself, because if you slip down that path of, hey, I didn't accomplish this, so it means that I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I shouldn't be up to hard things, or whatever nonsense, right, that our brains want to serve up to us, I want you to catch it, because that means you've slid into that place of pursuing accomplishments to prove you're good enough, not because the accomplishment is worthy of your pursuing it. So let me go on from there, but this is what we're going to talk about today. Really, three primary, pieces that I thought would make a lot of sense to have in this context, in this conversation, as you're considering your 2023. One, how to make better decisions. The next one is a little excerpt from my failure plan formula. And then finally, 3 commitments to keep you on track in 2023. And by the way, I know that we're also getting you a download for the strategic plan template. It's a very simple template. And I will also get you a link, because there is a session I did on LinkedIn where I actually walk you how to create a strategic plan for your career. So let me go on. So let's start with making better decisions. So if you continue to make, and I think we've probably all heard some version of this, if you continue to make the same decisions, you'll continue to have very similar outcomes, is what you've always had. So continue to make the same decisions in the areas that are working. And continue to make the same decisions because it sounds like it's working for you. And here's what I want you to consider when there's an area of your life, right? If you sit here and think for a moment, what in my career, what in my life, what in this experience or this relationship is not working? That often comes down to something you think you're right about, but you're actually wrong about. Okay, so I want you to think about that for a second. Something you think you're right about, but you're actually wrong about. And the challenge with that is that being wrong feels exactly the same as being right. So there is no way to necessarily distinguish it. But I want you to stay open to making new and different decisions when you want to see new and different outcomes. And so I want to introduce you to the decision driver journey. The decision driver journey is a model I created to help really explain why we do what we do, in particular when it doesn't actually seem to make any sense and doesn't actually seem to serve us, and oftentimes actually takes us farther away from where we're trying to go. And in fact, you might spot it more readily when you see other people doing it, when you see other people making decisions that you're literally what pops into your head is, what were they thinking? Why did they do that? What prompted that reaction? Right? If you've ever thought that about someone else's decisions or next action or behavior, this will shed a little light. It's a very simple model. And again, I love it because I think it's immediately accessible. And so I'm going to look to you to let me know, in what circumstance you see yourself in any of these parts of the journey. So think about that as I'm speaking. It's probably going to resonate, or you're going to see yourself in one or all of these, because it is a journey. It's not a destination. So you can find yourself in one area, in one part of your life, or even in one community that you're a part of, showing up in one way, right? And then in another community, for whatever reason, that feels inaccessible. Like you can't show up in the same way. You can't show up as powerfully. You can't advocate as confidently. And so this will help you understand a little bit about that. And again, it probably one of my favorite things is how it helps me also understand a little bit about where someone else might be coming from. So let me get into the model. As you can see, it's broken up across 3 different dimensions. The leader experience, meaning the experience to you or to me as the individual. Your focus, meaning where most of your cognitive power and energy and intention is going. And then the decision driver, what's actually driving or prompting your decisions and how you decide to move forward. So as you can see already on the screen at the bottom is that first level. And this is what I refer to as the concerned citizen. Now, the concerned citizen is really focused on themselves. And that's often they're here because they've had a particularly bad spell at work, started to internalize extended, periods of criticism, negativity, maybe an environment where they feel like there's no one they can trust. And so that's the concerned citizen. The experience to that person is one of fear. There's a lot of anxiety there, a lot of desire to hide and play small. And really the playing small is just because they're trying to essentially be a smaller target, right? You're trying to be a smaller target and stay out of the crosshairs of whatever it is you think might be threatening you or causing you to lose more than you already have. And so as you can see on the right, the decision driver here is really loss avoidance and self-preservation. And really, if you want to think about it as one word, it's survival. That's it. It's just survival. You're just trying to get by from one day to the next. And as you can imagine, there is, in this space, there's really no space for innovation or inspiration or elevating others, or that doesn't really live in this space. So, as I explain that, can you think back to an experience where you might have been operating in that way, right? Where the key driver behind the decisions you were making might have sounded something like, how do I keep them from picking me? Let me just make it to the end of this meeting. Yeah, they say they want my input, but all they're going to do is bash if I actually share, or something to that extent. Now, I'm not even suggesting that those comments are wrong, but rather that those are what was driving your decisions at the time. Literally just trying to keep yourself safe and out of harm's way. So think about that. I'm going to go on to the next one. Now, the next one is the self-conscious careerist. And here our focus is on our image and our ego. And what that means is that we're really driven by trying to look good and save face and, not be embarrassed and not feel uncomfortable. And oftentimes to one up the next person. Like that is a lot of the experience here. And sorry, that's a lot of the driver, but the experience here is incredibly reactive. And what that means and what that might look like for you is that when you're in a meeting, what might be going through your head, instead of considering the topic of the meeting and considering how you can add value and how you can contribute to a solution or whatever the intent of the meeting is, you might be caught up thinking, what did that raised eyebrow mean? Why didn't they invite me to lunch? I was here. What did it mean when they asked me that question? So can you guys see that? When our brains start going to that place, and we're spending a lot of time trying to trying to guess, trying to imagine what it is that's going through another individual's head, right? We think we can mind read, and we're really interested in what everyone else is thinking or saying or doing about us. Although, of course, it's almost never about us, but we think it's about us. And so here's the challenge with this self-conscious careerist space. Because the driver, one of the primary drivers is validation, that tends to get us in this sort of spiral of overworking, right? And the people pleasing. This is also where that, I think you heard Brandy mention at the beginning that I help people become influential, sought after leaders without overworking, people pleasing, or selling their souls. And all three of those live in this space. But it's not all bad, because this is also the closest we have to a default. And I say that because of our desire and even our design to go after accomplishment, to see if we can do the next, the bigger, the higher thing. But again, this distinguishes when that accomplishment is intended for validation versus the accomplishment that's for accomplishment's sake, because that accomplishment is worthy of us pursuing it. And then finally, at the top level, of course, this is where all of us want to be. This is the career CEO or chief strategist level. Now, at the chief strategist level, our focus is really on our mission. And what I mean by that is what we're trying to accomplish, the intended or desired outcome. And so what's driving our decisions here is a conviction to purpose. And the reason that's so important is because purpose doesn't get derailed just because you got something wrong. Purpose doesn't get derailed just because someone criticized, right? Purpose doesn't get derailed just because someone said no. Like, the purpose remains consistent and there. Now, where the real challenge lives is when we're not driven by purpose. The alternative is to be driven by praise, meaning trying to get it right. But the first thing to go out the window when something goes wrong is your ability to show up powerfully. So when you're driven by praise and not getting it perfectly is what you consider to be something going wrong, you've essentially kind of outsourced your ability to stay effective and stay on task and focused. The experience here you'll see at the left is really one of clarity and confidence, and what I refer to as being in the zone. And to be very specific, what I mean by that is being in a state where you're pouring yourself into what you're doing in such a way that there's no room left for that constant judgment and chatter in the back of your head telling you either it's not good enough or what so-and-so going to think and blah, blah, all of that stuff. Rather, you're just pouring yourself and your brilliance into whatever the task at hand is. So I wanted to introduce those to you, and we're going to bring them up a little bit as we continue to talk, but now I want to check in with you. I want to check in with you and ask you, I don't want you to necessarily out yourselves, but I want to ask, for those of you who are, see yourselves, let's say, in the concerned citizen space at the very bottom, or have seen yourselves in that space, can you also recognize how you've been at those higher levels in other parts of your life, other communities, other relationships, other jobs, other projects, etc.? Can you see how you've been at higher levels in some spaces and lower levels in others? Go ahead and give me a yes or a thumbs up or anything like that. But I want to see if this resonates and whether this seems to apply to your experience so far. Okay, and it looks like it does apply to most. So thank you guys for engaging with me on that as well. And I find that it really does, that it's irrelevant, the industry or even your level of experience or background, but rather a lot of our drive as human beings is around getting the admiration and acceptance and feeling a sense of esteem received from others. And while there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, because that's part of being a human being, and we can't make that wrong, what we need to watch out for is when it becomes selling out, right? Selling out on ourselves, selling out on our goals, selling out on our dreams. Again, that constant people pleasing, that not being willing to own our wins unless someone else says that we won first. Does that sound familiar? Like, you're pretty sure you knocked it out of the park, and in fact, you feel really good about it, but you almost withhold your ability to feel good about it until someone else tells you that you did a good job. Isn't it funny how we do that? It's absolutely funny how we do that. So I want to talk about the failure plan formula. And I love this when I saw it. Failure is always an option. Absolutely, failure is always an option. And failure is not a problem. Failure is simply information, right? Failure is simply information. And Lynette, I see your comment that you're raised to stay modest. Oh, I have so much to say about that. So I need to think about where we want to go with that. But I'm going kind of off the slide now, away from the slide, and I'm responding to this comment of raised to stay modest. How many of you have been raised to remain humble and modest, and to not, really to almost hide or dim our brilliance a little bit so that no one thinks that we're trying to, show anybody up, or toot your own horn, or that you think you're better than anybody else. And unfortunately, I think this is particularly predominant among, braggadocious, particularly predominant among women. And it's really unfortunate, because I think, especially me being Gen X, this is a very Gen X thing. Be humble, stay in your lane, defer to the people who know more, have a higher title, whatever the case happens to be. And what I want to say about that is that it is a lie. Anytime you are invited to, asked to, or expected to dim who you are for someone else's benefit, just know you're out of integrity. I don't mince words about that. That's absolutely out of integrity. And what you're doing is inadvertently kind of flittering away the impact, the legacy, the contribution that can come from your gifts or your accomplishments. So I want you to hold on to that, because under no circumstances do I want us to walk away and continue to hold in our heads that, well, I can't say this thing about myself because, what if not everybody agrees? Or what if I make somebody feel bad? The fact of the matter is, and what I want to share to have you put your mind at ease, is that when you're willing to recognize your brilliance, your contributions, and just as well, the areas where you're still developing or still growing, or simply are not your areas of expertise, you allow others a permission to do the same. Imagine how wonderful when not only do you not dim your light, you help somebody else light their candle. So I want to leave you with that, because it's so important. And I think for for this generation, Generation X in particular, and maybe I would say all of us, maybe I shouldn't say in particular, this feeling of, if we're good enough, others will call out our brilliance. Others will acknowledge us. Others will invite us to the table. So we don't need to draw attention or let others see our who we are. That is not true. Because here's the thing, not everyone is trying to catch you winning. And that's okay. What we don't want is for your ability to show up effectively, create the legacy that you wanted to create, have the impact you wanted to have, elevate the lives that you wanted to elevate, be dependent on whether a person is trying to catch you winning, or whether an organization has set out a beautiful career path for you, or whether your boss likes you. Of course, you want your organization to have it figured out and you have career pathing set up. Yes? I mean, we expect this from our employers. Of course, we want people to be inclusive anytime we come into a space. We want them to be welcoming. We want them to be open-minded, to have a growth mindset. Of course we do. But are you willing to stake your career, your life, your impact, and how you show up on that being the case? Or are you committed to showing up and having that impact even when that's not the case? So I feel like I'm preaching here, but I hope that this is landing, because it's a little aside from what we're talking about, and yet has so much to do with it. It has so much to do with it. And I'm going to go into the failure plan, and because I want to leave you with this. It's actually a very simple approach to use the possibility of failure and setbacks in your favor versus what we often do, which is have the possibility of failure and setbacks, we use them against us, right? We have the fear of how we're going to behave towards ourselves if we fall short, be enough to keep us from even trying. And the fact of the matter is, what I refer to as failing right is going all in, doing what you can, screwing it up, right? Absolutely blowing it, reassessing. In the process, you learn something, you practice something, and then you grew. And then you go back and you try it again. Like, that's what I consider failing right. The only kind of failure that's wrong is the one that comes from deciding you're not even going to try because you don't trust the things you're going to say and think to yourself or about yourself if something doesn't go the way you expect it to. So I want you to really think about that. When it comes to failure, do you have your own back? Because here's the distinction. You can feel confident and know who you are, again, when everything is going according to plan. But I want you to think about where you go when things don't. What does your self-talk look like? What does the committee in the back of your head have to say to you about that? And how much do you entertain that conversation? That's a conversation you do not need to entertain. Now, that it's always going to be on the table, right? That inner critic that's going on back there, that's always going to be there, and that's okay. As I like to put it, it's, those harsh or negative or self-judging thoughts are always going to be on the menu. But just like any restaurant you go to, there are going to be plenty of things on the menu, some you don't like, and so just don't order them. But let them be on the menu. Don't be dismayed because your brain still goes to that moment of self-judgment because you want to crawl up and hide for a while, right? We don't need to stay in that space. So let me introduce this, one little trick, and I just shared this recently on social media, but I wanted to talk about it here. And this is a pre-mortem approach. So how many of you have heard of a post-mortem? If you work on, project basis, if you work on implementations, if you work on any sort of project management type work, anything like that, right? Where what a post-mortem is that you did the work, and now after you're all done, you sit down with all the project team members and you look back at what happened and you say, hey, what could we have done differently? What can we do differently next time? What didn't go according to plan that we can use to inform how do we plan for the next one, right? And so it can be incredibly powerful. But what I want to invite you to do as part of the failure plan formula is to do a pre-mortem. And this is how you do that. You first consider the goal or the objective that you're looking at. So in this case, it might be, let's say you're planning on getting promoted in 2023. So you're planning on getting promoted. and going to that next level in 2023. I want you to fast forward, right? If you expect the promotion to happen in 6 months and 12 months, fast forward to that time and assume failure. I know it's going to be uncomfortable, but you can handle it. There is no feeling you cannot handle. So I want you to assume failure. Okay, that's step one. The next step is to identify. Now, again, just like I mentioned with that postmortem, now look back, right, that pretend flash forward timeline, and identify those potential causes of failure. If you assume failure, what can you assume were the likely causes or contributors to that failure? And then solve for them. That's it. It is literally that simple. And this is one of my favorites because while it's really common in the space of strategy execution and project management to think about mitigation plans and, hopefully avoid the problem altogether, we don't do that. We don't bring that brilliance and that same strategic thinking, that same quality of thinking and intentionality when it comes to our personal lives, our individual careers, etc. So I want to pause here for a second. What kind of impact do you think it might have had if you'd taken time, let's say, actually, let's look forward. So let me look forward. What kind of impact do you think it might have if you're able to do a pre-mortem on whatever your next big objective is? What kind of impact might it have? I want to have you share in the chat. So go ahead and open up the chat and put your hands on the keyboard and just give me a couple of words. What kind of impact do you suspect it would have if you applied a pre-mortem to your next big intention, initiative, objective, etc.? What kind of impact would it have? And I'll go on while you guys share that in the chat. But get this down. It's incredibly simple and uncannily effective. It is incredibly effective because your brain serves up the potential roadblocks that your brain often wants to avoid because we don't like thinking about failure. It's uncomfortable to think about the thing that might go wrong. You can even use this as you're walking into meetings, into discussions. If you know who the players are in the room and you more or less know what some of their agendas or intentions or perspectives are, you can try that on. So this is very similar to a conversation planner approach. I don't know if there's a specific name for that one, but I use that as well. Just considering what the person is going to respond to what you say. And then being able to sit with how you're going to address that response. So you might come up with 2 or 3 different reactions and already have a response to address it. So I'm going to go on from here, but I see that. Let's see. Lynette, I do that. I don't know. I didn't know it had a name. I called it preventing fires. Yes, it is. It is absolutely that. It's preventing fires. It's not just that, though. It makes you, and this is where it's different from that it makes us comfortable talking about failure. Because right now we don't like to talk about it. Literally, I have had people say to me, and I've had to kind of coach them out of it, but I've had people say to me things like, well, I don't want to talk about failure too much because it might, derail things. That's not how that works. Talking about failure just makes sure that everything that you have the ability to handle and inform, you're running with. What you don't want are preventable surprises, because think about it, there's so many things you control and so many things you don't. So instead of spending time on the things you don't control, let's focus on what you do. And one of the things you can control is considering all those potential alternate realities and your response to those, right? Your own version of an outcome metaverse and how you're going to respond to each of those. So I'm going to go on. And then I wanted to leave you with 3 commitments. And Ellison, I see your response here. Let's see, it would help me with planning and definitely lessen any anxiety that a failure could cause, because I already expected it. And it's not even so much that you expect failure, but that you acknowledge that, as my little sign said before, that, failure is always an option, right? Failure is always an option. Yeah, employers create an environment that makes these types of conversations taboo and will write you off as being negative. Right. And so I do have thoughts about that, because there is obviously a way to bring it up when we're bringing it up, especially in relation to somebody else's idea. So I'm just going to make a comment on this, or make a recommendation. And I would recommend actually saying, hey, what if we make a list of everything that we need to mitigate or plan for, just so that we're ready in the event anything doesn't go according to plan? Because, you and we know that 90% of the time things don't go according to plan, but not everyone else does, especially when it's their idea, right? Especially when it's their idea. So that's okay. We don't want to discount anybody's idea, but get excited about their idea and then ask and then what question, right? Oh my God, I love that. And then how do you think we could address it, if this is asked, or when this happens, or if this is the request? And there's so much more I can say about that, but I want to address that quickly, because we absolutely want to encourage those conversations, and be responsible for the energy we bring, because we don't want to have people feeling like we're bashing or killing their ideas. That's not the intent at all. In fact, what we're trying to do is breathe life and success into these ideas, right? And make them better through our collective contributions. So when we can approach the conversation from that intention, not from the intention of, no, this will never work, and here's why, but the intention of, oh, I really like this, and I think it'll really work if we can address this, this, and this. You guys with me? How that energy feels very different, and you can be pointing out the same 3 gaps or holes, but can you see how differently that lands when what you're trying to do is augment and increase the likelihood of success to somebody else's contribution, as opposed to when you're coming at it from that won't work, right? Which again it might still be coming from the right place from you, like, no, that won't work, we got to fix this. But again, we can also be responsible for how we bring that up, so that other people can hear us. So 3 commitments. I'm going to be really quick about this, because I know we are just about at time. Hi, Angela. let me see if I can do this. Hold on a second. Okay, there we go. So the first one is place purpose over praise. I want you to commit to yourself that you're going to be driven by purpose. So we talked about that decision driver journey, and that at the top, and what keeps you at that chief strategist level is not getting hijacked by pursuing praise. Not everyone is trying to catch you winning. So when you're being driven by praise, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, frustration, and to get distracted from what actually matters most. Okay, commit to placing purpose over praise. What's most important here, and why? And when things go off the rails, or something's not looking the way you want it to, for example, in a meeting, and people start yelling, stop and ask yourself, what's most important here now? Again, another one of my favorite questions, what's most important here now? And just reconnect. It pulls you out of the reactivity of, I need to react or respond to everything else that was said, and this person's bad attitude and how they rolled their eyes at me. None of that is relevant when you're focusing on what's most important here now. So place purpose over praise. That's the first commitment. The second is, I want you to accept failure as part of success. And I know that one's harder, and a lot of people will be nodding at this one saying, oh yeah, I'm all over that. And yet we still secretly think that if we do everything just right, we're never going to fail. And I have thought that, so I want you to know you're in good company. but I want you to commit to at least trying to see and accept failure as a part of success. The massive successes and success stories that we refer to today are brought to us in response to or after failure, after massive failures typically. And then finally, I want you to have your own back. And here's what I mean by this. I want you to stop making failure, setbacks, other people not liking you, people being unfriendly or unwelcome or anything else like that. I want you to stop making that mean anything more than it means. See, when other people do things like that, when other people are rude, when other people don't respond or behave the way we want them to, when we don't get the result we were expecting, we want to make it about us. It is never about us. So don't make your failures and your setbacks about you. Adopt that scientist mindset. Everything is experimental. If that path didn't work, now what path do I need to explore? If that path didn't work, now what path do I need to explore? Do you see how that has nothing to do with you missing any sort of human qualities or worthiness or anything like that? None of that is relevant. None of that is relevant. What's relevant is, okay, that path didn't work. How can we assess it and figure out how to move forward? But in order to stay in that space, you have to be willing to have your own back and to not make it some inherent unworthiness about you when things don't go according to plan. Because what do we know? 90% of the time, things are not going to go according to plan, but you still want to be able to show up as an effective, intentional leader in that time. Okay, so I wanted to show you kind of what we did today. This is the framework I take my clients through in my group program, and I'm phasing out some of the one-on-one work, but this is what we do in the group program. And I want to introduce this to you very briefly because this is sequential, and I want you to understand why no matter how many credentials you have and how much you already know, why sometimes it feels like you're doing all the right things, but not getting the results you want. Everything has to start with knowing yourself, with understanding your blind spots, understanding your tender points, understanding your triggers, understanding where you lose confidence. And so today we talked a little bit about decision drivers, and also, I brought in some conversation on self-confidence. But I want you to know everything actually starts with values. Like, what's most important to you and why? It always starts with values. And I invite you all to revisit that for yourselves at least every year. Why is this important to me? Is this still important to me? Before you decide how it's going to inform the rest. I want to tell you briefly what the rest is, because this is actually really good. If I don't say so myself. But that knowing yourself, that's what I refer to as self-mastery. Okay, and that is so that you're not so immediately caught up and drawn into the swirl of anyone or anything else around you. So we need to start there if what you want is to create intentional success. The next one is role mastery. And let me tell you what this is, because this is different than, I've never really heard it talked about in the way that I talk about it. But role mastery and knowing your role, it's not about doing a good job. It is about understanding what moves the needle for success in that role, whether it's the role you have or the role you want to go to. Understanding what actually moves the needle. Because here's what especially ambitious professionals do in that absence. They work really, really, really hard, try to do everything correctly, try to say yes to all, only to find out that, kind of like when you're driving a car, they weren't looking at the real speedometer, they were looking at the fake speedometer. So you need to figure out what those actual needles are that need to be moved in your environment. And there are two questions. I'm going to throw this in just really briefly. There are two questions I want you to ask as you're considering your success plan for next year and what that means for how you're going to focus and organize your time. One is, who is my organization promoting? And the other one is, where are they investing dollars? Because those two questions will help begin to uncover what the organization actually values, what they're actually looking for versus what they say they value. Okay, so very important. I know we all, we work for organizations who have these values pillars posted all over the place, but then I want you to pause. You can consider those, but then I want you to look around and see who they're promoting. Do those people reflect the values the organization says it values? Because if the answer is no, then you need to distinguish what the organization actually values. Okay, and then we go on to goal mastery. And what I want to say here is you saw a little smidget of, one tactic for failure planning, but goal mastery comes last because this is where you get to distinguish who and how you want to be as a leader. This is where you get to help continuously and on purpose elevate others by taking them through a similar process. But most importantly, this is also where you get to now, with no blinders on and with no, trying to prove something or people please going on in the back of your head, you get to create a strategic plan for your career. Because here's what's true. The only thing more important than knowing where you fit in your organization's strategic plan is knowing where your organization fits into yours. You guys with me? The only thing more important than knowing where you fit in your organization's strategic plan is knowing where they fit into yours. So a couple of things. Let's see, I know we only have a couple minutes for questions, so go ahead and feel free to unmute and ask questions. But what I wanted to do is share with you that I have a free boot camp coming up. I want to invite you to enroll in the boot camp. Again, it's absolutely free. It's 5 days. You can catch it either on LinkedIn or Eventbrite. So go ahead and scan either of these, whichever makes sense for you, and join us there. So thank you so much for adding everything that's necessary. I have one more link I want to share with you, and that is the one for the very simple strategic plan template. I'll also make sure that you have that at the, at the boot camp. But here's what I want to offer up. Take what resonated today and put it into action. Take 30 seconds right now and grab either your phone or your calendar, however it is that you manage your days, and write your next action in there. Because the transformation doesn't live in the knowing, right? The transformation lives in the doing. And so I want to see you all be in the doing. And for those of you where it makes sense, join the boot camp. It's fantastic. This is the last boot camp I did. I know for a fact that is the type of program that people have paid many, many dollars for. And in some cases, I've gotten reviews that it's been the most valuable professional development activity they've done, paid or otherwise, in the last several years. So join the boot camp. It's really, really good. And I'm taking a little more time to be able to break down and slice up, different avenues. And you'll also hear about my group program, which you can try to get on my schedule for a consultation, but I know that the schedule's a little bit catchy and I'm phasing those out. But please join the bootcamp. If this resonated with you, you will absolutely love that. And if you can't catch it live, you can watch the recordings. But let's see, what questions do you have? What questions do you have? I know we're at exactly 1 o'clock. So I don't know if we can take like 5 minutes for a couple of questions. Is that okay?
Sure, I think so. I think we can go ahead. Anyone that has to go, thank you so much for being here. But if you'd like to stick around and ask questions, please feel free to do that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm here If you want to unmute, I don't know if you can unmute, but if you can, please feel free to unmute and ask a question or drop it in the chat.
And while we're waiting on questions, I'll go ahead and remind everyone that we have 2 more amazing events coming up in December. Next week on the 8th, be sure to join us for some networking tips to improve your conversations. We've got Professor Bill Davis presenting for us. And Professor Davis has been a huge supporter and ally of the CWL for years, since the very beginning. He is absolutely an amazing speaker. And we're just absolutely thrilled that he's going to be with us next week. So be sure to put that on your calendars. That is December 8th next week. And then the following week on December 15th, we have got a free self-care workshop that is going to be brought to us by Lisa Hines, the CEO of the Confidence Track. And she is going to teach us 3 key steps for prioritizing our self-care. So be sure to put those things on your calendar, because you don't want to miss out on that.
I love that. Prioritizing self-care. That's fantastic. Okay, excellent. So I don't see any questions. So thank you so much to whoever's still here. I see most of you are still here. Thank you so much. It's been so wonderful being with you. And as you can see, I have no shortage of words, unfortunately, and love talking about, all of these topics, anything having to do with empowering communities, but more importantly, and probably near and dear to my heart, is empowering women and professionals of color, to see us all have the opportunities that we look forward to, and be able to create the type of impact and legacy that most human beings want to be able to create. So thank you again. I've loved being with you guys. Thank you to the Forbes School of Business and the Center for Women's Leadership. And until next time.
Thank you so much, Asiya. This has been amazing. We greatly appreciate you contributing your time and talents to the CWL. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Bye.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.